Hey everyone, Teo here. Today I'm reviewing the ASUS ProArt PX13 from the perspective of a visual content creator, someone who does digital art, graphic design, edits photos and videos. First of all, disclaimer, this is a review unit on loan from ASUS Singapore, and in this video I'll present to you my findings so that you can decide whether this is worth the money. And here in Singapore, this is quite pricey at 3,599 Singapore dollars, and this comes with 2 years warranty. And from what I have found out online, this is 1,700 US dollars elsewhere. Shown on the screen right now are the specifications for this review unit. The processor is the AMD Ryzen AI 9HX 370 processor, which is a 12-core processor. The graphics card is the Nvidia GeForce RTX 4050, and the display is a 13.3-inch high-res OLED display with touch screen, of course, but the refresh rate is just 60 Hz. There is 32 gigabytes of RAM and 1 terabyte of SSD storage. Alright, let me give you the bottom line up front. The 13.3-inch OLED display is vibrant, and I measured color support for 100% P3, 91% Adobe RGB, and 100% sRGB. So this display is relatively color accurate, and I was able to get my Spider X2 Ultra color calibrator to work with this OLED display. That calibrator doesn't work with all OLED displays. The brightness is just 240 nits from what I have measured, which is much lower compared to the advertised 400 nits, but for 240 nits, it's still bright enough for use in a bright indoor environment. The main limitation of this laptop for visual content creation, in my opinion, is the size of this 13.3-inch display. I would say 13-inch is the smallest display I would use for graphic design work. Personally, I would prefer something that is larger, something that's at least maybe 14 inches or larger. But 13-inch is still usable, as in I can still see the text and the icons, but they are on the smaller side. Anyway, this is Windows, so you can scale up the UI elements if you want to. However, if you scale up the UI elements, then the canvas space that you are left with will be slightly smaller. So when it comes to visual content creation, the display size is the limitation here. So it's best if you can connect this laptop to a much larger external display for graphic design work, but the selling point here is this is very compact and portable. The keyboard has backlight, and the typing experience is pretty good. The touchpad is big, accurate and responsive, and there is this ASUS dial that's built into the touchpad, which you can enable by swiping from the top right. Now, there are shortcuts from the ASUS dial which can be quite useful, and I'll talk more about that later. Port selection is pretty good. Check out the huge fan grills by the side. That's the proprietary power port, full-size HDMI 2.1, USB 4, Type-C, 3.5mm audio jack. On the other side, you get the power button, micro SD card slot, USB-A, another USB 4 Type-C, and 2 more huge fan grills. This convertible design allows you to fold the display like this. So this is actually good for playing games with a controller or watching shows, because you can hide the keyboard at the back, so you can actually have the display much closer to you for a more immersive gaming or movie watching experience. One actual downside of this display is it's really reflective. I just wish ASUS could have used some sort of anti-reflective coating on it. As I open this game, I can really hear the fan start spinning, and the fan noise is quite loud. However, if you are just using the laptop for non-processor intensive work such as web browsing, watching videos, or even simple graphic design, not including video editing, then there usually is no fan noise at all. Gaming performance, I would say, is decent enough. This is Red Dead Redemption 2 and the resolution is 1920 by 1200 and I'm able to get around 45 to 50 frames per second. So if you reduce the resolution down to the next level, which is 1680 by 1050, then you get maybe around 50 to 55 frames per second. Oh, did I mention that this display has a refresh rate of just 60 Hz? So for gaming purposes, you may be able to find better gaming laptops at this price point from ASUS, but maybe you won't find those laptops in this form factor. And the last thing I want to talk about is the writing and drawing performance. You can definitely use this laptop as a tablet for writing and drawing. And notice how the display actually dims. That's because of the auto brightness. For writing, it works well enough. However, for drawing, there is slight wobble and jitter with slow diagonal lines. So this is obviously going to affect drawing accuracy. So this is not a laptop I would recommend for drawing purposes with the ASUS Pen, which by the way is not included with the purchase. Battery life is okay, it's not the best. I was able to get slightly more than 7 hours for non-processor intensive work with the display near maximum brightness. So the bottom line is, I actually do not have many negative things to say about this laptop. And for a laptop at this price point, there shouldn't be any deal breakers, and there aren't any deal breakers. Everything about a laptop is just about compromise. So if you want a larger display, then the laptop will be heavier. If you want better graphics performance, then prepare to spend more. Now, as a portable compact laptop, this is powerful, the display is vibrant, and the build quality is pretty good. And now on to the full review, where I give you more details. So let's start by looking at the things included with the purchase, which I do not have with me. So I'm going to draw those items instead. So let me just change the color of the brush. So obviously you will get the laptop in the box. And while drawing, I will also want to talk about the drawing experience. Oops. By the way, I have this microphone box here between the display and the back of the laptop so that I can prop up the display at an angle. So there is this 200 watt power adapter. By the way, notice that I'm using this button to undo because this app does not support finger shortcuts or gesture shortcuts for undo. So there is this very big 200 watt charger, and there is this cable, and here in Singapore we are using this 3-pin plug. So the plug will vary depending on your country, obviously. Oops, I've tried to undo again. So you can pan, zoom and rotate. Those are the finger gestures that are supported with most drawing apps and graphic design apps. It's just that if you want to use 2 fingers to undo, not all apps support this shortcut. Okay. Next, there is this Ethernet to USB-C adapter. And that's not all. There is still this thing here. There is a backpack included, which is actually pretty nice. ASUS makes pretty good backpacks, so it's included with this purchase, and that's pretty much it. Now this pen, the ASUS Pen 2, is not included and it's sold separately. This pen uses Microsoft Pen protocol, so if you don't want to buy this pen, you can buy other pens that use Microsoft Pen protocol. But this pen is nice in the sense that there are two side buttons. The side buttons may or may not be customizable depending on the app you use, and this pen is powered by an internal battery which you can charge using this hidden USB-C port. This is a plastic pen tip and it's quite firm with minimal movement, and you can replace this pen tip easily just by pulling this out and putting a new one in. So earlier on I mentioned there is diagonal line wobble, so right now I'm drawing diagonal lines. Let me just rotate this slightly so that I can draw a diagonal line. This is actually not too bad. Yeah, this is actually pretty straight. I mean, there is slight wobble, but it's not like too much wobble. However, for professional digital artists, you may need to have a pen that is even more accurate. But for drawing, I mean for sketches like this, casual sketches, this seems fine. Now this power adapter actually uses, the end of this power adapter actually has this connector, and this is a proprietary connector. Unfortunately, this is not USB-C. Notice the pressure sensitivity. So this is how thick the brush is, and if you use minimal pressure you can actually draw thin lines. So this is actually not too bad. Let's take a look at the true test for pressure sensitivity. Thick, thin, thick, thin, thick. Okay, it's not too bad. And also this is a diagonal line, so I don't see that much wobble. Now for drawing purposes, I would definitely highly recommend you buy a tablet stand or a laptop stand so that you can prop up the display or prop up the laptop. Oh, let's take a look at how the lines taper. I almost forgot to show you that. So if you draw quick strokes like this, you can see sometimes the lines, they don't taper that smoothly or sharply. Oops, yep, it doesn't taper that smoothly or sharply. Yep. But you can actually work around the taper. So if you want the lines to taper smoothly and sharply, you can actually rely on pressure sensitivity. For example, you can actually press down harder and then lighter. Harder and then lighter to have the lines taper. But this is going to involve more work because with a very sensitive pen, you can actually just draw like this and the lines will taper smoothly and sharply automatically. But not with this ASUS pen, as you can see, as the ends here are rounded and they end quite abruptly. Next, let's take a closer look at the design of this laptop. If you are considering a 13.3-inch laptop, chances are it's because you want the portability, because if you're just using the laptop at home and if you are not going to be bringing this around often, you can go with a bigger laptop with a bigger display, which is going to be more productive for visual content work. Now 13.3 inch is to me big enough, and I am glad that the aspect ratio is 16:10, it's not 16:9. So this design actually looks quite beautiful, and this is a compact design. The build quality is really solid, and it should be given the price point. The bezels are quite thin, thicker at the top and bottom. There is a camera which can be used for face unlock, and it's fast and effective. The keyboard is great to type on. The keys have good travel and feedback, and they feel well made, but they are also quite susceptible to fingerprints. Now, one thing I don't quite like about this keyboard is this. Because AI is so popular right now, many laptop makers have replaced the right control key with this Microsoft Copilot key. Now, there is actually the Copilot shortcut here at the taskbar, so I don't see why they need to replace that control key, which I find very useful. I find the control key way more useful than this because when I'm doing work, my hand is on the mouse or on the touchpad. I can use my other hand to use keyboard shortcuts in this area. For example, Ctrl O to open, Ctrl 0 plus minus to zoom in and out, Ctrl Shift bracket to arrange items. But without the control key, I will have to use the control here and my fingers just cannot stretch all the way to the right side. So if it's possible, I will find some key mapping app to map this back to a control key. So that's the only downside for this keyboard layout. The function key has a function lock, so you can choose to use the F1 to F12 keys or shortcuts. The touchpad is big and it works fine, and here at the top left corner there is the ASUS dial, which is not enabled by default. So to enable this, you have to swipe left from the top right corner because there is this capacitive button thing, and it doesn't work all the time, so sometimes when I swipe it doesn't power on the ASUS dial, but it works most of the time. Let's see how you can create shortcuts for the ASUS dial using the ASUS dial and control panel driver. Sorry about the reflection because this display is so reflective and glossy. So make sure you enable ASUS dial first. Now you can create shortcuts for specific apps. Let me just use the touch screen. So you can create up to 8 shortcuts, and you can create 8 groups of 8 shortcuts. So for example, if I want to create shortcuts for Affinity Photo, I just select Affinity Photo or add whatever app you want to this drop menu. And then on the right side here, just tap Add Function so you can add shortcuts. And then click or tap on Customize Function, and this will allow you to input your own keyboard shortcut. So I have created several shortcuts here. So whenever you launch Affinity Photo and enable the ASUS dial, by right, the shortcuts that you have customized will show up, but sometimes there is this problem. So this is loading the default ASUS dial instead of the shortcuts that I have created. So I believe there is some bug, so the software is not perfect. I've just restarted the laptop, so now the ASUS dial works, and these are the 5 shortcuts that I have created. So let's select rotate. So now I'm using the ASUS dial to rotate the canvas, and if I tap the dial again one time, it will go back. I tap again, it will go in to the shortcut. So let's flip. Yep, so you can flip vertical or horizontal depending on which shortcut you have customized. We have zoom as well, zoom out, zoom in. Let's look at the ports again. So this is a proprietary power port. ASUS has included a 200 watt charger, so if you need more power than what you can get through USB-C charging, you use this power port. That's full-size HDMI and USB 4 Type-C 3.5mm audio jack. The power button is not located at a good location because when I pick up the laptop several times a day, I can press the power button several times a day accidentally. So this is not a good location. This micro SD card slot is not that useful. I just don't understand why companies would put a micro SD card slot instead of a full-size SD card slot. This is USB 3.1 Type A, and this is another USB 4 Type-C. This laptop is kinda thin, it's really compact, and you can see there is a lot of ventilation grills for air intake and also for the fan exhaust. Here also on the sides. And on the back, I'm not sure if this is plastic or metal, but the build quality is solid. And this is unfortunately quite susceptible to fingerprints as well. And there are more grills here. I did not open this up, so I cannot tell you whether or not you can replace the RAM or the internal SSD. Anyway, this laptop comes with 32 gigs of RAM, so RAM is not a problem. Now, the rubber feet are these two long strips of rubber, so they will basically elevate the laptop above the table so that air can go into the fans, and I can see two fans. Let's take a closer look at this OLED display, which is also a touch screen. And as mentioned earlier, I just don't like how reflective and how glossy this is. And the brightness of 240 nits is not going to go through the reflection if you are using this laptop in very bright conditions. But if you are using this laptop at home, indoors, then it looks good. Resolution on this 13.3-inch display is 2880 by 1800, so the visuals are sharp and pixelation is not noticeable. This is an OLED display, so the contrast level is fantastic. You can get blacks and really bright highlights, and there is HDR support because it's an OLED display. And I like the 16 by 10 aspect ratio, which is good for work. I would have preferred 3 by 2, but 16 by 10 is good enough. And since this is an OLED display, color accuracy is pretty good. Now, I have color calibrated this display and I measured color support for 100% sRGB and P3 and 91% Adobe RGB. And thankfully, I was able to use my Spider X2 Ultra to calibrate this OLED display because that calibrator doesn't work on all OLED displays for some reason. The hinge is quite stiff, so you can have the display down all the way like this and it can hold the position quite well. And when you lift the laptop, the display is not going to move down unless you lift the laptop too quickly like this. So this is the convertible design, which is actually pretty good for watching movies and for playing games or watching videos because you hide the keyboard at the back, so in front you don't get any distractions. So this is good if you are playing with controllers, but if you are playing with the keyboard, then obviously you use the laptop as a laptop. So this is just another option for usage, for display usage. General performance of this laptop is smooth and lag-free. For non-processor intensive work such as writing, checking emails, watching videos, or even editing photos, the fan noise cannot be heard even if the fans are spinning, and the laptop doesn't get that warm, which is great. If you're doing processor intensive work such as exporting videos, exporting 3D renders, or playing games, then yes, the fans will spin, the laptop will get hot, and battery life of course will drain faster, but overall performance is still smooth. And that is to be expected from such an expensive and powerful laptop. This laptop can be used for drawing, but the experience or the feel is quite different compared to drawing on a pen display or pen tablet, mostly because this reflective and glossy surface is quite smooth and this pen glides along quite easily. Anyway, when it comes to drawing on a tablet or any digital device, you just need to spend some time to get used to it. And you can certainly draw on this tablet. So here you can see I have thin and thick lines, no issues. If I want to taper the strokes, I would just press down hard and lift my pen up slowly, because if I taper the lines like this, it doesn't taper. So this is the workaround for this pen. Pressure sensitivity or initial activation force for this pen is okay, I guess. I mean, you can draw thin lines. You can still draw thin lines with a thick brush selected, so you don't have to always go into the brush settings to adjust the brush size. So that can be quite convenient. Thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin, yeah. It's just that sometimes when you're drawing fast, you may not get the tapered strokes. Let me erase this. So this is actually not an eraser, it's just a button. I wonder why they have a button at the back, which is not an eraser. So let me just find out where the eraser is. Oh, you know what? The eraser is here. So let me just erase this. So if this pen has an eraser, it could be quite convenient, but it's not really a deal breaker or anything, because usually when I'm drawing, I'm using a keyboard. But right now I'm drawing on this laptop as a tablet because I have folded the keyboard behind, because I want to talk about the finger gestures as well. The finger gestures that work with this laptop are usually just the pan, zoom and rotate. Yeah, so you can pan, zoom and rotate, but for this app, MediBang Paint Pro, it doesn't support other shortcuts such as 2 fingers to undo. I think drawing works fine. Yeah, let's draw a square box, because a square box has diagonal lines. Oops, oops. Yeah, it takes some time to get used to the zoom. There is palm rejection, so you can actually place your palm on the display and draw. So notice how I'm drawing this box. I'm drawing separate lines like this, and then I join the lines together. And I am able to join the lines properly without leaving gaps and without the lines overshooting. So there are no issues with cursor misalignment. And this display is laminated, so when you are drawing, there is no gap. There's almost no gap between the line and the pen tip. So when you're drawing, it really looks like the line is coming out from beneath the pen tip. And latency performance is quite decent. Decent as in it's not slow. This is the typical latency, where you can still see the line trying to catch up with the pen tip. This is actually alright for drawing purposes. For writing, when you're writing fast, you can definitely feel the latency, but when writing, it's still able to capture my handwriting quite accurately. Sorry about the noise. This app is Concepts. Let's draw a slow diagonal line. I can see slight wobble and jitter, but it's actually not too bad. Now, how much wobble and jitter there is sometimes will depend on the app you use, but there is no obvious jitter pattern. So this is still okay, but not as good compared to pen tablets and pen display. This is actually okay for a pen with Microsoft Pen Protocol. But if you do need that extra accuracy for drawing, then I would say this pen is not good enough. For writing, it's fine. Oops. Oops. So sometimes when I tap on the display, things like this can happen. And sometimes when I press the side button, it would start erasing. Yeah. Writing actually works fine. Palm rejection also works fine, so I have set the settings to move the canvas when my palm or the finger is on the display, and it works fine. Now Windows sometimes can be quite irritating because when you swipe from the left side, because the display is small, sometimes when you swipe from the left side, you may actually swipe out that thing, this notification panel, and if you swipe from the left side, you get this. It can happen sometimes, but here, interestingly, it doesn't happen that easily. So that is good. Concepts is an app that supports shortcuts for 2 fingers, 3, 4 fingers. So if I use 2 fingers to undo, it will undo. If I use 3 fingers, sometimes it would interfere with the gesture shortcuts supported by Windows OS. For example, if we go to the web browser, if I use 3 fingers to swipe down, you can see that it actually minimizes. And if I swipe up, it would open the app again. Okay, let's go back to concepts. If I go into the concepts settings under interaction, you can actually set or customize the shortcuts you want to use for 2 fingers, 3 fingers, or 4 fingers. Now, if you want to use the shortcuts here, you will have to disable the Windows gesture shortcuts. Otherwise, there will be conflicts. For a pen that uses Microsoft Pen Protocol, the drawing performance of this pen and the laptop is actually better compared to the Surface Pro, interestingly. This laptop has some AI features that can help you with drawing, writing, and finding information, but I don't use AI that much, so I cannot say much about AI. So to conclude, is this laptop good for visual content creators? Now, if I'm looking for a laptop to create visual content, the display has to be color accurate, and this display is color accurate enough. And more importantly, I was able to use my Spider color calibrator to calibrate this OLED display. The laptop has to be powerful, and this laptop is powerful enough. The port selection has to be good, and the port selection with this laptop is good enough, except there is no SD card reader. I just don't use micro SD cards, and I use that full-size SD card every day. So without the SD card reader, I will have to use a physical card reader. So that is definitely one downside with this laptop. As for other downsides, I don't really have like many negative things to say. You know what? Let me use the Microsoft Copilot AI feature to find out what downsides there are with this laptop. What are the downsides for the ASUS PX13? Enter, and let's see if the AI will give us a biased review. Let's see what we have. The ASUS ProArt PX13 is a powerful and versatile laptop, especially for creative professionals, but it does have some downsides, such as the 60Hz refresh rate, which certainly is a downside or limitation considering the high price point of this laptop. The battery life is shorter compared to other laptops, yes, but they did not mention the actual number for the battery life, which by the way is very difficult to test because there are so many variables. Fan noise can be quite noisy. The fan noise is noisy when the fans are spinning at full speed, but if you're just checking emails, writing, and watching videos, you won't hear the fans. The ASUS Pen 2 is not included. You have to buy that separately. Oh, this pen may or may not be included depending on your country or region. Dial pad sensitivity, the ASUS dial is indeed quite sensitive. Now you can adjust the sensitivity with the software, but it's still quite sensitive. Keyboard layout can feel slightly cramped. keyboard layout to me looks okay. I don't have any issues with the keyboard layout. The price is on the high end of the price spectrum, and this is true. By the way, you don't actually need to buy a laptop for AI features because Microsoft Copilot is actually available from Microsoft Edge web browser. So if you open Microsoft Edge and do a search for Bing, B-I-N-G, Copilot, enter. This is pretty much the same thing as this. Yeah, so let's write something here. Write me a review for the ASUS PX13. And here it goes. So this can be quite useful because I believe the AI is doing a search on the web and summarizing all the reviews that it found to give you this list that you can read very easily. Yeah, I think it even has some sources quoted at the bottom. Yeah, so wow, this is oh, if you click on the link, on some of the links, it would actually link to the article that it got the information from. So this is not random information, by the way. This is actually research. So you can do the research yourself, or you can just type in the question for Microsoft Copilot to do the search for you. You know what? I actually did use Microsoft Copilot to help me identify downsides and limitations for this laptop. And it is helpful because sometimes I just miss out on certain details because I did not check certain things. So Microsoft Copilot is indeed useful in some situations. The last thing I want to talk about is battery life, and based on my calculations, I was able to get slightly more than 7 hours of battery life on this laptop for non-processor intensive work with the display near maximum brightness. So battery life is okay. It's not as good compared to some other laptops, but it is decent enough. And of course, if you are doing processor intensive work such as editing videos, doing 3D work, then battery life may be shorter. And the battery charging speed is, I would say, fast enough. This is charging with USB-C. If you use the included 200-watt charger, then charging speed is going to be faster, but I have no issues with the charging speed. And for battery life, it's okay, it's acceptable. And this is my review for the ASUS PX13 laptop. If you guys are interested to buy this, you can check out the links that I have for you in the video description below. If you have other questions regarding this laptop, let me know in the comment section. Thanks for watching. See you guys again. Bye.